But first, as we all know, it is an election year in the United States of America, and it looks all but certain that it will be a Donald Trump versus Joe Biden 2020 rematch. The Democrats seem saddled with the ailing Sleepy Joe, considering the fact they failed to put forward any other remotely presidential talent as of yet. And last week, Donald Trump officially crossed the threshold of 1,215 delegates that he needed and is now the Republicans' presumptive presidential nominee. As such, you can imagine the mainstream media and the Democrats have gone into lockstep to smear Trump with everything they can, even if it's outright lies. And why wouldn't they? They can't win this election on merit. Joe Biden has not proved himself to be a particularly remarkable president, and Americans are still suffering through a major cost of living crisis thanks to inflation and rising interest rates. Not to mention the hordes of illegal immigrants pouring over the southern border. So it's no wonder then that they've wheeled out a few key plays from the 2016 playbook. Namely, take a thing that Trump said that was perfectly innocuous and rip it from context to make him look like an unhinged violent dictator. The quote in question was this little soundbite taken from a speech Donald Trump gave in Ohio over the weekend.
Now, if I don't get elected, it's going to be a bloodbath for the whole... That's going to be the least of it. It's going to be a bloodbath for the country. That'll be the least of it.
Now, that clip was tweeted by the Biden-Harris campaign, go figure, with the caption simply stating, "Trump, if I don't get elected, it's going to be a bloodbath. It's going to be a bloodbath for the country." Now, to the casual observer, that sounds like Donald Trump is saying that if he doesn't win the 2024 election, then he's going to incite a violent bloodbath, presumably to take the presidency by force. Now, if you're a reasonable person, you'd look at that and think, that's a weird thing to say. I wonder what the context was. But the Democrats know that among their ranks of voters and potential voters are a reasonably large chunk of drama queens and hysterics who just hate Donald Trump so much that they'll happily believe he's Mussolini reincarnated. And they would never, ever seek context for those things because that would just be like racist or something. The mainstream media, which is, as we know, stuffed to the brim with cultural wokies and pearl-clutching left liberals, ran with this narrative, knowing full well that the Venn diagram of Democrats and their viewers is basically a circle. Narrative-pushing headlines included, "Trump says some migrants are not people and predicts a bloodbath if he loses," and that was from the New York Times. "Trump predicts bloodbath if he loses election and claims Biden beat Obama," from The Guardian. "Trump says there will be a bloodbath if he loses the election." That was from NBC. "Trump says country faces bloodbath if Biden wins in November." That one is from Politico. And "Trump says there will be a bloodbath and elections will end if he isn't re-elected." That one is from Rolling Stone. Gosh, sounds pretty serious and scary, doesn't it? But as we reasonable people know, when the mainstream media reports anything about Trump, you should assume they're lying, because most of the time, they are. So, what did Donald Trump really say at that rally in Ohio? Here's the full context.
Mexico has taken, over a period of 30 years, 34% of the automobile manufacturing business in our country. Think of it, went to Mexico. China now is building a couple of massive plants where they're going to build the cars in Mexico and they think that they're going to sell those cars into the United States with no tax at the border. Let me tell you something to China. If you're listening, President Xi, and you and I are friends, but he understands the way I deal, those big monster car manufacturing plants that you're building in Mexico right now, and you think you're going to get that, you're going to not hire Americans, and you're going to sell the cars to us. No. We're going to put a 100% tariff on every single car that comes across the line, and you're not going to be able to sell those cars. If I get elected, now, if I don't get elected, it's going to be a bloodbath for the whole... That's going to be the least of it. It's going to be a bloodbath for the country. That'll be the least of it.
So, as you can see, Trump was saying that if he doesn't get elected, it would be a bloodbath for the auto industry and by proxy the rest of the country's economy. Trump even clarified what he meant in a recent interview with former UKIP leader and the father of Brexit, Nigel Farage.
You used the word bloodbath. I did a little Truth the other day. Truth is on fire. Yep. It's doing great. And I put it out this morning, I guess it was put out, and it talks about the word bloodbath, and all of the people that are complaining about it, they all used it. It's a commonly used phrase when you're getting slaughtered economically, when you're getting slaughtered socially, when you're getting slaughtered.
Not only that, even the Merriam-Webster dictionary includes a definition of bloodbath as a major economic disaster. So, as you can clearly see, Donald Trump was using the word bloodbath as a piece of hyperbole to describe what would happen to the auto industry and the economy if he doesn't win the election. As we know, Trump is very prone to using hyperbole, which, of course, the media also knows, but they continue to willfully ignore Trump's hyperbole and present it literally and out of context to score cheap political points. And again, that's because they know the Democrats can't win on merit, so they have to score points somehow. Like this quite extraordinary dissertation from MSNBC.
Michael Beschloss, I want to ask you about Donald Trump increasingly sounding like a fascist, a dictator, mimicking them, and using words that are clearly out of the pages of some of the most powerful autocrats or dictators of our time in the world.
Absolutely.
And I guess the fear is that for some Americans who may not be informed about history, there's that vulnerability that Trump preys upon. And then there are those who are making the choice. And I need to understand that. Is there any precedent? Or is this how fascism works? Are they sucked in and brought in on different terms, whether Trump has something on some Republican leaders or others are just so uninformed they don't care? Is it a mixture? How does it work? Is there a precedent?
Well, I totally agree with what you've just said, Mika, and that's how fascism and totalitarianism, and in Germany's case, the Holocaust came to Germany.
Just hysterical. I mean, how are they going to offer that commentary with a straight face? I have no idea. But the most insidious contribution to the bloodbath hoax was, of course, from the Biden-Harris campaign. They are spreading outright lies about Trump and his use of the term bloodbath, not just in their initial tweet posting the soundbite, but in a statement about it and in this new campaign ad.
Now, if I don't get elected, it's going to be a bloodbath, and it's going to be a bloodbath for the country.
Jews will not replace us.
But you also had people that were very fine people on both sides.
Are you willing to condemn white supremacists and militia groups from elections?
Stand back and stand by.
Please rise for the horribly and unfairly treated January 6th hostages.
There'll be a lot of pardons and commutations of January 6th defendants.
Yes, absolutely.
Tell your supporters now, no matter what, no violence.
That it's going to be a bloodbath.
So, as you can see, not only is the Biden administration reiterating the hoax that Donald Trump threatened a violent bloodbath if he's elected, they've also wheeled out the conspiracy theory that Donald Trump sympathizes with white supremacists and called the Nazis and white supremacists who were part of the infamous protest-turned-riot, thanks in part to Antifa, at Charlottesville in 2018, very fine people. A couple of things on that. First, the soundbite of Trump talking about very fine people is taken from a press conference that occurred soon after the Charlottesville riot and is, of course, ripped from context. Here, everyone, is the full quote.
You had some very bad people in that group, but you also had people that were very fine people on both sides. You had people in that group, excuse me, I saw the same pictures as you did. You had people in that group that were there to protest the taking down of, to them, a very, very important statue and the renaming of a park from Robert E. Lee to another name.
Robert E. Lee are not the same.
Well, no, George Washington was a slave owner. Was George Washington a slave owner? So will George Washington now lose his status? Are we going to take down, excuse me, are we going to take down statues to George Washington? How about Thomas Jefferson? What do you think of Thomas Jefferson? You like him?
I do.
Okay, good. Are we going to take down the statue? Because he was a major slave owner. Now we're going to take down his statue. So you know what? It's fine. You're changing history, you're changing culture, and you had people, and I'm not talking about the neo-Nazis and the white nationalists, because they should be condemned totally. But you had many people in that group other than neo-Nazis and white nationalists, okay? And the press has treated them absolutely unfairly. Now, in the other group also, you had some fine people, but you also had troublemakers, and you see them come with the black outfits and with the helmets and with the baseball bats. You had a lot of bad people in the other group.
I'm not talking about the neo-Nazis and the white nationalists because they should be condemned totally. It's funny what happens when you play the whole clip, isn't it? It's pretty plain that Donald Trump did not call those extremists very fine people. And for good measure, here's a clip taken from a 3-minute clip of Trump condemning white supremacy over the years.
So are you prepared right now to make a clear and unequivocal statement renouncing the support of all white supremacists?
Of course I am. Of course I am. When Chris joined, we had a news conference, and they asked me the exact same question. I said, I disavow. I disavowed then. I disavowed today on ABC with George Stephanopoulos. I disavowed again.
David Duke is a bad person who I disavowed on numerous occasions over the years.
I'm willing to do anything. I want to see peace.
Then do it, sir.
Say it. Do it. Say it. I totally disavow the Ku Klux Klan. I totally disavow David Duke. Ultimately, he got to the Ku Klux Klan, which obviously I'm going to disavow.
I've rejected David Duke. I've rejected the KKK, the Ku Klux Klan.
David Duke is saying to his supporters and followers, vote for Donald Trump. White supremacists are saying, vote. Do you want those votes?
No, I don't want them, and I don't want him to say it.
And you don't want the supporters?
No, I don't want anything.
What do you think of white supremacists, by the way?
I don't like any group of hate.
David Duke, for the record, is a very well-known American political white supremacist. But despite all of this condemnation of white supremacists and white nationalists and the rest, it is nevertheless clear in the wake of the near certainty that Donald Trump will be the Republican nominee, the Democrats are reverting to their old tricks. And look, why wouldn't they? They worked in 2020. But in 2020, the Democrats had the advantage of mass mail-in voting and, of course, COVID hysteria. That's not so in 2024. And considering the fact most of the recent opinion polls have Donald Trump ahead of Biden by 2 or more points, despite the Democrats' constant smearing and lawfare against him, could it be that the Biden administration and the mainstream media have finally overplayed their hand?